John thought Helen was the prettiest girl in the village, but she had no use for him. Why would I marry a fisherman like you, she asked, when I could marry the lord of the manor? John strode out of her house and down the steep path to the beach. He was so hungry he to see spring flowers bursting into bloom, or noticed the soft breeze blowing in from the sea. Suddenly he stopped. What was that eerie sound? Unlike anything he ever heard before. It was almost as if the wind and the waves were singing a haunting melody. He kept on the path. A pebble loosened by his foot rattled down to the beach. Did the singer hear him coming? He stood listening, and the unearthly song continued. When he reached the bottom of the path, he slipped behind a boulder and peeked behind him inside. There on the back of his neck stood on end. There was a stranger there, singing that eerie song. She was half under the waves, turning sea shells and starfish into her long golden curls. How odd, John thought. But he was even more surprised by what she did next. She swam to the shore and flung up herself on a flat-topped rock. With a flip of her tail, some memories were real, just as his grandmother had said so long ago. Her little story is flowing into his mind. They're a fickle lot, she told him. If they like you, they'll give you calm seas. If they don't like you, expect trouble. But listen, if you find a fishy scale from a mermaid's tail, she might grant you 3 wishes. 3 wishes. This is what John needed. Tiptoed over to the mermaid's rock and leapt up behind her, plucking one of the golden scales. She screeched and slapped him with her tail. He waved the scale in front of her nose. Now you owe me 3 wishes. You didn't find it. You took it, she cried. She tried to grab it back. It was obvious to John that she was furious, and a crafty look came into her eyes. Maybe I could grant you your wishes after all, she said in falsely honored tones. My first wish is for Helen to marry me, he said. I don't understand what she said now. My second wish is to catch the biggest fish in the sea, so I'll make lots of money and won't have to go fishing every day. My third wish is to not die by drowning. He had known too many fishermen who lost their lives at sea. Granted, said the mermaid, but this time her voice was harsh. She dove into the waves and swam away. But when she turned to look back at him, he felt a twinge of fear. Her eyes were flashing with anger. John remembered what his grandmother had said about the amazing powers of mermaids. He began to wonder if he should have plucked that golden scale. Would the angry mermaid unleash furious storm, or send a devastating wave upon the land? And what if she was so mad that she didn't grant his wish after all? He decided to test the word. John ran to the path to the village and went directly to Helen's house. And he asked Helen, will you marry me? She looked dumbfounded and thought in her mind was, of course not. But the word that came out of her was yes. One was granted, John said to himself. But what he realized should have wished for a happy marriage, because Helen made his life miserable. She didn't understand why she had said yes. And she never stopped telling John how unhappy she was to be his bride. Even neighbors could hear her screaming at him. He no longer regretted fishing every day. It was such a relief to get him out of the house and away from her nagging. One morning, John decided to see if his second wish had come true. He bought a far stronger fish line than usual and a much bigger hook. And off he sailed. When he reached his lucky spot, he baited the hook, flung it out, and sailed down to wait for a bite from the biggest fish in the sea. "Today is the day," he shouted, hoping that the mermaid was listening. He was dreaming about how much money he would earn. When the fishing pole was almost jerked out of his hands, it was all John could do to hang on while the fish pulled him and his boat far out to sea. When the fish leaped out of the water, he looked like a monster, gigantic teeth and huge golden scales. Stranger yet, its angry eyes looked very much like those of the mermaid, but magnified 1,000 times. The fish whipped the line, first one way, then the other. So did the boat, again leaping out of the waves. Then it splashed down, drenching John with seawater. The fish looked at least 100 years old and very likely would taste vile. Who would want to buy it, John thought. Even if he managed to pull it aboard, it would sink his boat. So he reluctantly cut the fish line. Then the fish didn't even seem very grateful to be free. It spit out the hook and dove deep under the waves. Then it sped upward, smashed the stone into pieces. John was showing in the water, and the fish began to circle him. When it swallowed him in one big gulp, the merman hadn't made any promises about that, but the fish finally turned and swam away. John clenched a plank that had risen to the surface and hugged it to his chest. Hour after hour, he floated along. He was burned by the sun, chilling by the waves. His lip cracked and stung, constantly splashing by salty seawater. He almost hoped that the fish would come back and swallow him. Why, he asked himself, did I ever wish to catch such a big fish? When the oncoming tide finally washed him onto the beach, he realized the mermaid had fulfilled his third wish. She had not let him drown, but he was cold and exhausted and utterly miserable. He staggered to his feet and saw her sitting on the same rock, watching him as she combed her long golden hair. She looked incredibly triumphant. Did it please her that his wishes had gone awry? John curled up to pass to the village. When he hurried home, Helen started berating him. "What did you do to yourself?" she scolded. He told her that all the terrible things he endured. But then she screamed, "You lost our boat? Now what will we do?" John fell into bed without bothering to take off his clothes and pulled a pillow over his ears. When he awoke, he was ranting about dangerous mermaids. "Stop blaming mermaids," Helen screeched. "They don't exist." John decided he would prove her wrong if it was the last thing he did. He went to the beach and stayed from sunrise to sunset, day after day, peering around the rocks, scanning the waves. He had to catch that mermaid to prove himself to his wife. One day he hid under a pile of seagrass and then washed up to the tide. He laid there for hours. Books dropped out of the grass and crawled all over him, sand slipped into his hair and ears. down the back of his shirt. At last, the unexpected mermaid swam ashore and flipped herself on the nearest rock. She was singing her haunting songs again, and long as John listened, the odor he felt. Which completely befuddled his mind. John started to inch along, moving the entire pile of glass her way. She didn't notice a thing, not until she listened down her mirror to admire her golden curls. That's when she saw a startling reflection. John was rising out of the grass, ready to catch her, but she was ready. She swung around and swatted his nose with a cold mirror. If it's skills you want, you can have them all. John was so surprised that he grabbed his poor nose, but he didn't feel skin. His face seemed to be sprouting scales like those of a fish. John wrenched the mirror out of the mermaid's hands, but before he could see what was happening, he dropped it. His hand would turn into a fin. What was wrong with his legs? He flopped down on the sand. He could hardly breathe. He knew he had to get into the sea. Suddenly he was swimming and was hungrier than he ever had in his entire life. He lunged for a worm that he saw dangling in the water, but he didn't see the hook.